Get a songbook and turn to page 527. $527. I know not why God's wondrous grace to me he hath made known, nor why unworthy Christ in love redeemed me for his own. But I know whom I have believed and am persuaded that he is able to keep that which I've committed unto him against that day. I know not how this saving faith to me he did impart, nor how believing in his word brought peace within my heart. But I know whom I have believed and am persuaded that he is able to keep that which I've committed unto him against that day. I know not when my Lord may come at night or noonday fair, nor if I walk the veil with him or meet him in the air. But I know whom I have believed and am persuaded that he is able to keep that which I've committed unto him against that day. Brother Kermit, would you pray for us? Amen. It's good to see everybody here tonight, and hope you're having a great week. We got a new prayer list. If you didn't get one, holler at Mr. Rich back there and he'll get you one, but we got some new lists out. Look, don't forget we got a few things coming up. And we had a great week last week, I thought, with Brother McBride here. Pray for him as he goes in tomorrow and has surgery on his voice box or vocal cords or whatever. But anyhow, he goes in tomorrow. And then pray for Mr. Rance. He goes in on the 7th. What day is the 7th on? Tuesday. Next Tuesday, Mr. Rance will go in and be getting a. Which side you getting? Right side. Getting new hip on the right side. So remember to pray for those things specific. Brother Jeff Bean's mom's in the hospital, still very weak heart situation, and so I don't know what I guess they've not decided what they're going to do yet. But she still needs a lot of prayer. We have her on the right ends. We may have her somewhere else. I was thinking I did, but I think your dad used to be over here on the prayer list number 4. It may be wrong because we've got him over on list number 5, but sometimes when Valerie types them, she does like me and she changes letters, so. Right. But did he have some sort of procedure on the 19th of last month maybe? Okay. Mr. Pitts, I don't know if I think Brother Dave's teaching a class, but he's talked to him some. Mr. Pitts goes back in next Monday for another round of very, very strong chemo. He has to stay in the hospital for it for a couple days, maybe 2, 3, up to 4 days. And he did pretty good with the first round, so keep praying that he'll do all right. But right now he's pretty well, just from the waist down, he's just paralyzed. The sac cancer's got him in the spine somewhere, and they did tell him, even if it got rid of that, when your nerves get damaged, what takes you maybe 2 or 3 days in damage will take maybe 2 or 3 years to get back. So the chances of him getting back to normal is very slim. Plus, they don't give him much time even with the cancer. They're just trying to maybe prolong it a little while. So he needs a lot of prayer. He's very, very upbeat and doing very well as far as that. He said he's trying to get used to not being able to walk and it's hard to get used to being paralyzed when you've never been that. But he's not fallen yet, he said, and that's something that you can just pretty well expect is going to happen sooner or later. But they've got a ramp there at the house, some friends made for him, and getting back and forth to the doctor and to the car is a big project right now. So something we never think would ever happen, but sometimes it gets somebody. It's just an amazing thing, that surprising. What else going on out here we can talk about? Yes, ma'am. Okay. Mr. Rands? Steve Banks? Okay. As you say, he's in Arkansas? Okay. Mm-hmm. Who it now? Spell it. Kagan, Kagan, on the salvation list. I got big ears, but I can't hear very good, so if I get you to spell it, I can read your lips enough to figure it out. So. Kagan, Kagan, on the salvation list. Somehow we have never added our missionaries. I wrote them on the bottom of the list down there for you before I made copies of it. We took them on a couple months back, and I was just going through the list and looking. I thought, we don't even have our new missionaries on here. And so I'll blame that on my wife. She's got nothing to do with it, but I give her the blame for everything. While you're thinking, don't forget, here in a couple weeks, not this Sunday, but next Sunday, we will have tables set up all down through here, just kind of giving you an idea of some of the different opportunities or areas in the church where you can, you may want to get in and get involved, or may not. You may want to question some things about it, ask what's going on there. And as I was driving down the road picking up kids today and in the bus, and they was arguing and calling each other names, and this was the brothers and sisters, and they do all right with the others. And I said to myself, we better make sure we get a table out there in case there's people that said, man, I just really wish I could drive and pick up kids and put the preacher out of a job there. That'd be all right. But we'll have a bunch of things out there, and just to give you an idea of some of the ministries here. Anything else? Okay, we will come back to our prayer list at the end. And for now, let's open our Bibles to the book of Joshua, chapter number 24 tonight. Joshua, chapter number 24. I think Brian sent out a little message today of some things that we're going to be going over. And so while you're turning, we'll read some verses here in a minute. But in today's world, it seems that there are a lot of areas of our lives that we live in chaos. Now, maybe it's always been that way in the world, and I'm sure it has. And from reading the Bible, I can see it has been in a lot of cases. But I run across people, and I could probably name you some people that you know, that it's not that they have areas of their life that's in chaos. Their entire life is chaos. Every part of their life is, and that is a shame. And then for some, you might call them the blessed ones. There might just be one or two areas of their lives that's kind of chaotic. And so what I thought I would do is one thing I like about real cold weather and bad weather is I get less time going to do other things. I just stay in the office a lot, and so I get a lot of ideas and a lot of thoughts running through my head. And this Sunday we're going to begin preaching on the family, and I don't do that often, but we're going to probably take at least 5 weeks, and I'm going to preach on the family. I've got at least 5 different thoughts that's going on that I want to try to bring out. And so while I was looking at those things, I thought part of the things I see is chaos. And so I thought we'd spend a few weeks on Wednesday nights looking at different areas of our lives and trying to figure out that if that area of my life is chaotic, what can I do about it? I mean, I don't think that God intends for us to realize that it's chaotic and then just give up. I think maybe he's got some solutions. So today I'm going to look at an area of our life that's near and dear to all of us, our families. Sometimes, you see, we live with them and we love them, but if we're honest, sometimes our family could be the cause of our chaos. And I'm not going to get into a lot of detail in it, but there's some things here that we're going to look at here in Joshua in just a moment. So I want to see what the Bible says about the family and how to respond when it seems like it must be the family that's bringing chaos into my life. And so what are some of the adjustments I can make? If my chaos is caused by family, then what can I do? How can I adjust it? I mean, I don't think it's going to work if you decide to bring home a ball bat and start threatening everybody in the family. That's not going to work too well. But it is one thing to know that your family life is chaotic, and it's a completely different thing to know from the Bible, what can I do about it? What's some things I can put in order that'll make it work better? And so here in Joshua chapter number 24, we're going to read just a couple verses to start with. We'll read some more here in a little bit in the book of Deuteronomy. But this is Joshua. He's a leader of the nation. And he's throwing out I guess you might say, a challenge to the people. He's speaking to the entire nation. And he tells them this in verse number 14. He says, "Now therefore fear the Lord and serve him in sincerity and in truth. And put away the gods which your fathers served on the other side of the flood and in Egypt, and serve ye the Lord. And if it seem evil unto you to serve the Lord, choose you this day whom you will serve, whether the gods which your fathers served that were on the other side of the flood, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Now my thought is tonight, my family is bringing me chaos. What can I do? And I will say this. I'll start by, my first thought would be simply this. There will be chaos in the home if the husband, if the dad, is not the spiritual leader of the home. Here's what goes on. What says, Joshua says in verse 15, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Now he's making this great announcement as husband to his wife and as father to his children, that under my leadership, we're going to serve God here. He's a spiritual leader. Now, this is not a knock on ladies. A lot of ladies think it is. And when I have weddings now, one of the first things ladies tell me we have wedding vows is they don't want anything about obey in there. Well, the truth is, God's not changed his mind on how things are. He has an order. He has a role. And a lot of people frown on this as a husband being in authority, and that's a bad thing for them. The truth is, it's more of a husband being in responsibility. He has a great responsibility. God said, it's you, husband, that I'm going to hold accountable for making sure the spiritual life of your family is headed in the right direction, doing those things. And so that is God's plan. That's his role. He doesn't, and we'll get into more of that as we deal with the family on Sunday. But and be honest with you, what I've experienced when I see families, for the most part, the ladies want the men to be the spiritual leader. Now, every now and then I'll run across some, they want to run everything, and I can tell you already that family is chaotic because everything's out of order. Everything's not where it should be. But Joshua is saying, I am not going to neglect my responsibility as a spiritual leader of my home. Now, again, I'm thinking about what brings chaos. Well, if Dad, if you say, let my wife take care of that, let her, she can take the kids to church and she'll do this, and I got no time for all that. That's not, the life's going to be chaotic in your family. It's always going to be because you're out of place. And too many husbands, too many dads neglect their role as a spiritual leader and expect their wife to do it, expect the kids to do it on their own. And the result is it's chaos because God never intended for the wife to be in charge of spiritual things. He intended for her to be involved, but not in charge of it. And so, but I read this and I realize Joshua is the one making this statement. And then I kind of wondered to myself, I wonder if Joshua, when he made this announcement, if he was thinking back to Achan and his family, because that family was chaotic. And if you remember, what happened was God told him, he says, when you go into Jericho, we're not taking things here. We're not taking spoils. He said, we're getting rid of it. So don't anybody take anything. Because if you do, he said, he's going to bring trouble to Israel. He's going to bring trouble in your family. Well, they got into the very next battle after they went into Jericho. They won Jericho. They did a good job in defeating it, and God bless. But the majority of the people had no idea that there was someone in there that wasn't doing what God said. His name was Achan. And so when they got into the next battle, Israel was defeated because of Achan's sin. He took something, a Babylonian garment, a robe, something like that, and it was the accursed is what it's called there in the Bible. And here's my thought. And I'm talking about if a husband is not the spiritual leader in the home. As a husband, as a dad, you cannot be willfully disobedient to what God says and still consider yourself a spiritual leader in the home, because you're not. You're out of line. And you're not taking your family in the right direction. And you might think you're spiritually leading your home, but actually you're spiritually leading them in the wrong direction, and that is even worse. So here's what we have to simply do. If we find ourselves in the wrong direction, doing the wrong things, practicing something wrong, we got to clean it up for our sake, for the family's sake. As a husband, it has to be taken care of. As a dad, but here's what Achan did. He didn't clean it up. Achan didn't. And when I say clean it up, I'm not talking about do something about it when you get caught, because that's where most people are. Most people today, they're willing to make amends. They're willing to do things, and you can watch it in politics. Everybody's no good, and then all of a sudden this person's no good. But the trouble is they're all doing things, but until they get caught, they don't want to say it's nothing wrong with what they're doing. Then they get caught. Well, yeah, I made a little mistake here or there. But cleaned it up, what it amounts to is, if you belong to God and you head in a direction you shouldn't, I can guarantee you God's going to speak to you about it as soon as you do that. If you're at all sensitive to the things of God or have been, then God will speak to you. And if you immediately do something about that, when that voice says something to you, you need to clean this up, or you need to do something about this, that's when we respond. But instead, we don't. I wonder what things could have been like for Israel in their next battle if Achan had immediately confessed his sin. This was a crazy thing. I don't know why I took this. I need to get with Joshua and tell him what I've done and get this confessed and turn this over to him and let him take it and burn it and get rid of it. He didn't do that. So he only came clean after Israel was defeated and after Joshua figured out that someone had done something wrong because God told him. And so he starts going through the families one at a time, or tribes one at a time, and then families one at a time. And finally, after it comes down to him, I'm guilty. He paid a pretty high price for it, if you think about it. They took him, his wife, his sons, his daughters, and everything they had, and they stoned them to death. Now, I don't want to try to read too much into this, but in my mind, I would say likely the whole family was in on this. Likely the whole family knew what was going on. But I don't know. But here, my point is simply this. A dad who is not the spiritual leader in the home is going to bring chaos to the family. Now, we're going to see a lot of things outside of the family besides this today or later on. But today, I'm just looking at how the family can cause chaos. And Dad, you can be the number one cause by heading in a direction of your own and not doing as God tells you. You cannot be the spiritual leader if you're heading in the wrong direction. You have to be what God calls you to be. A second thing I see from these verses, and I think I'll just read the verses again because I want to get through my head what they're saying, but I'll give you the second thing and then I'll read the verses. But there's going to be chaos in the home if you as parents don't spell it out and make sure your kids understand plainly that either you're serving God, or here he calls it the gods whom your father served, or the gods of the Amorites. What that really is that's serving Satan, because there is no other gods. It's just made up. These are just false gods. They're replacement gods that Satan throws at people. So what our kids have to be taught plain and understand from us is, by my actions, I'm either serving God or I'm serving Satan. That's why the Bible, and I'll probably get ahead of myself, so I'll wait before I throw that verse out. But here's what let's read these verses again. It says, "Now therefore fear the Lord, and serve him in sincerity and in truth, and put away the gods which your fathers served on the other side of the flood and in Egypt, and serve your Lord." Again, those were not gods. They were false gods. They didn't do anything. They didn't have hands that could use, but they were things that people trusted in outside of the true God, and we have that today. We still have all those things. And it says, if it seem evil unto you to serve the Lord, then choose you this day whom you will serve, whether the gods which your fathers served that were on the other side of the flood, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. So here again, my thought here is, I have to make it plain as a parent to the kids in the family that your actions they show who you're following. They show who you're serving. You're either serving God or you're serving the devil. And he makes it very plain here to what he says here. But there are parents in this day we live, they think they've figured out what I call a third way. Now, there is no third way, but they think they figured it out. And the Bible, and I don't know the verse, but there's a verse over there in Corinthians, I believe, it says, "Whatsoever you eat, whatsoever you drink, do it all to the glory of God." Well, here's where we're at it today, and I've seen this in parents, and I listen to it sometimes, and I'm old, and I know I'm old-fashioned, and so I think things that younger people don't today, but I can still see some things just going too far. And here's what we kind of think: okay, I'm going to let you do these things that I know they're not right, but you're going to church on Sunday. It's like, as long as you can do a lot of wrong things during the week, you can go out with those friends, and I realize those are not good friends, and they're not helping you get closer to God. They're taking you away from God. But you're going to church on Sunday, and you've heard things, you know things about these people, and but you can't stop your kids. And granted, you can't stop them from doing everything. The kids are going to do some things. In fact, I'll give you some more advice on Sunday when I'm talking about the family, how how to get your kids to go in the right direction. It's probably not real good advice, but it sounds good anyhow. But we justify everything by, sometimes we say, well, you know what, they're not as bad as some others. And that's true also. I remember when my kids was growing up, and sometimes they'd have friends over from school or somebody from the baseball team. And at the time, I thought, my wife tells me I never let them be kids. She said, you was too much on them, and you made them be little adults. And I didn't think I did that. But then when other kids would come over, they would be there for 2 or 3 hours, and they would go home. I told my wife, I said, if our kids ever act like that, I will tie them to a tree for about 3 years. And so evidently it was something there, and it was strange to watch that. But then we would say, well, they're not as bad as some, and that's what we do. And so, but we tried to pull all that back by saying, but you're going to church on Sunday, as though that's going to fix everything. And what we've done is we feel like it seems like we've created a third way, but it's not really a third way. But what we've opened the door for them to go ahead and go the wrong direction, serve the devil, you might say, is what we're saying here. You either serve God or serve Satan. We've opened the door for them to serve the other gods, to serve Satan. But yet we get them in church on Sunday and we think we've got it. Now what happens? Well, when they become young adults, what do you think they're going to do? Are they going to hang with those type friends? Or are they going to stay in church? Well, they're probably going to hang with those friends. They're probably going to get out. They might say it this way, there's a lot more fun with those people than there is down at the church house. Well, there's a lot of truth to that, because the Bible says there is pleasure in sin for a season. And there is fun for a while. There's things that people do that's probably fun, and I'm glad to say that I've never drank, but I can see when I've seen people who couldn't stand up, and I'll be honest with you, it's kind of funny watching them. But then when I think about it, it's kind of sick too. I can't understand what would make somebody want to get themselves in a position where they had no control over themselves. I don't know. I've never had any kind of desires like that. But there is pleasure in sin for a season. So what's happened is we've opened up a third way, and you do these things, but you serve God, and we lose them. And they get to be adults, young adults, and they're not interested in church. They're not interested in God. And I think when Joshua said, as for me and my house, we'll serve the Lord, I think he pretty well knew I'm going to be in the minority when I say this. Most of us are going to say that. And could I tell you, if you're saved and you really are interested and really wanting to serve the Lord, you're going to be in the minority. You're always going to be on this earth. Joshua knew when he came back to Moses after they spied out the promised land, he knew when he gave that report, he said, hey, that's ours. Let's go get it. He knew he was going to be in the minority, and he was. And he knew when he told the people that you need to decide, are you going to serve God or are you going to serve these other gods? Are you going to serve Satan? He knew that most of them was probably going to serve Satan, and he's going to be in the minority. But he still said it because he still took his stand. The truth is, we don't like being in the minority. I don't like it. When it comes election time, and I see people that I think those people shouldn't even be out of jail, and they're running for office, and people's voting for them. I mentioned this in one of my sermons a few weeks ago. I don't even remember what state it was. I don't have my notes in front of me. That some fella, he'd had all kinds of things he had done while he was in office, and they reelected him. He should have been in prison. They put him back in. They don't care. And we're in the people that want things to be right are in the minority, and so what do? We don't want being in the minority, so we listen to Satan. He throws out his ideas, and he'll tell the young people, and we'll fall for this. And granted, my kids are raised now; they're out of the house. I don't have to deal with this, but you will as parents. There's going to be a time they're going to say, "Dad, everybody else is doing there. Everybody else is doing it. Everybody else is going there. Everybody else can stay out late." I can remember those conversations. I remember when both of my boys was dating. And they had some sort of, I don't know, they thought I was too strict one day, and one of them bothered us. We had a lot of family time, a lot of times where I said, we're sitting down, we're going to have a little talk. And I remember that they was giving all the things they thought I was too tough on. I said, okay, let's have a little powwow. They hated powwows too. But we had them, and they come find out after I asked their girlfriends, I said, okay, what's this and this, what's the rules at your house? And they would say, and I said, well, what's the rules at our house? And then well, you don't have a rule. I said, right, because you know what you're supposed to do. I said, as long as you stay within what you know, I don't have to lay down some black and white rules. But I said, so we talked about 1 a.m. curfew. I said, what happens if you come in at 1 o'clock in the morning? He said, we'd be in a lot of trouble. I said, why? What's your time you got to be in? We don't have a time. We just know we can't be in at 1 o'clock. I said, right. I said, and that's the way it is. And as long as you're reasonable, we don't have to make a lot of rules as long as I can trust you. I said, but just as soon as I have to make rules, then it's going to be a lot tougher. And I don't know what that has to do with this, but I'm simply saying what happens is the kids get to the place and say, they're doing it. Everybody else is doing it. Billy's doing it. Why can't I do it? And the fact is our children see more and they know more and they've experienced more than we probably did at this time in our life. But here's where they fall short. They think they're more grown at this age, but they're not. They're still kids, and they still need some guidance. My number one responsibility as a parent, and yours as a parent, is to bring your child to the Lord. Get them to where they'll get saved. Bring them to Christ. Now you can't force them. You can't say, but you have to. It's sort of like you can do this in like everything else. When the kids are growing up, my kids like to play. They like to play golf. They didn't used to play golf, but I played golf, and they liked it because I made it seem like something that would be fun to do. Well, you can do the same thing with serving the Lord. You can either come home and complain about everybody in the church and about what the preacher said and about the preacher's too long and they sang too loud. The 2 people in the choir was way off, and you can complain about everything, and that's not taking your children toward the Lord, and they're not going to care for God, and they're going to see that, and they're going to turn away from those things. Or you can make this is life. This is where we enjoy things. Man, we get to go to church today. We get to do things, and we're involved, and you get them involved, and the next thing you know, you're not forcing nothing on them. They decide, you know what, I need to be saved too. I just realized that, and they get saved. And so that is our responsibility to get them. One place it calls it adorning the gospel. Make the things of God so that they understand those are great things. And we want to be involved in this, and we want to do those things, and then they want to serve after that. They want to get involved. They want to do what they can for the Lord. That's our number one priority. So here's what I'm saying. The family is going to be in chaos if Dad's not the spiritual leader he ought to be. Number 2, the family is going to be in chaos if our children don't understand and we don't make it plain to them that by the things you do, your actions in life, you're either following God or you're following Satan. There's no third ground. There's no different way. You're either doing what's right or you're doing what's wrong. There's not really a gray area to that. And then the third thing I would say, if you want to turn over to Deuteronomy chapter number 6, I'll read a few verses there. Deuteronomy chapter number 6. I think I can fairly say this: there will be chaos in your home if God is not a frequent source of discussion in your home. Now, I know normally when I give you an outline, it rhymes and all that, but I didn't do very good with that tonight. Probably won't on the rest of them either. But we need to talk about God, not just at church. In fact, we need to talk about God more at church. We walk through them doors, probably never mention anything about the sermon, about what's happened in our spiritual life this week. There's nothing wrong with talking about other things, but sometimes that's all we talk about. We never talk about God, never talk about spiritual things. But here's what he says, and again, my thought is there's going to be chaos in your home if God is not a frequent source of discussion. He doesn't have to be everything. Don't go berserk. I know some people, well, no, we can't watch a ball game because we can only watch spiritual shows. Well, you'll drive people crazy of doing that. You try those things, and when I grew up, there was always some preacher around that tried to tell everybody, get rid of your TVs. So everybody was throwing their TVs out, and as soon as they got them all thrown out, then that preacher went and bought one. And then next thing you know, everybody's got TVs again, and TVs can be a very bad thing if you don't control them. So can a lot of other things, and so just learn to control them. But if you leave God out of conversations, there's going to be chaos in the home. Listen to these verses, Deuteronomy chapter 6 and verse 4. He says, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord. And thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thine heart, with all thy soul, and with all thy might. And these words which I command thee this day shall be in thine heart. And thou shalt teach them diligently unto thy children. And thou shalt talk of them when thou sittest in thine house, and when thou walkest by the way, and when thou liest down, And when thou risest up, thou shalt bind them for a sign upon thine hand, and they shall be as frontlets between thine eyes, and thou shalt write them upon the posts of thy house and on thy gates. Could I say this? Unfortunately, I know of a lot of homes today of people who are supposed to be Christians, and they never talk about God at home. Never happens. Listen to all the times he says here that we ought to be talking about God in the house. He says, when you sit down in the house, well, I do a lot of that. He said, talk about God. Make some reference to what God's done. Boy, this is a nice, comfortable chair the Lord's blessed us with. Something you don't have to throw out Bible verses about everything. And he says, when you lie down in your bed, talk about God. When you get up in the morning, thank the Lord for a new day. Thank the Lord for what's going on. And if we talked about God like he says we should, there'd be a lot of discussion about him in the home. In a house that's doing what God said, they're always talking about him. They're always talking about Christ. And if you're teaching about God in the home, I know how kids are. I got grandkids now. They're always inquisitive. They've always got questions. So if you're talking about cars, they're going to ask about cars. If you're talking about basketball, they're going to ask about basketball. You talk about God, they're going to ask about God. So talk about him. And there's always going to be things they're going to want. And they may come home and say, they said this in junior church today. What about this? What should we do? Well, we ought to give them a 2 or 3 word answer and send them off. And no, sit down and figure it out. Discuss it with them. Talk about, that's a good reason. They told you a good thing here, and here's why. And it's not our responsibility to just give them some 1 or 2 word answer and end that conversation, but take their questions seriously, especially when they're young, because they got a lot of questions, and give them a complete answer. And in houses where God is frequently talked about, I just don't think there's chaos. Now, let me clarify what I'm saying there. I don't believe there'll be chaos in a house where God's frequently talked about, but I do know houses like this. Mom goes her way and does what she wants to do, no thought of God. Dad goes his way, does what he wants to do, no thought of God. Kids all go their way, no thought of God. But as soon as somebody gets mad at somebody else, they start throwing Bible verses at them. That's not the same as talking and having conversation about God and with God. That's not going to help anything. That's just going to be a really big mess, chaotic family that knows a few Bible verses. And I know some of those, and you know some of those, and they're not doing well. But I want to read a couple more verses, and I'll be done. In Matthew chapter 11, the Bible says this, "Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you, and learn of me, for I am meek and lowly in heart, and you shall find rest unto your souls." In some homes, there's no rest for their souls, because the home is a source of chaos. And so they're always in turmoil. There's always things going on. And but today we've seen three things that we can do to fix some of that if we're going to remove the chaos. As dads and husbands, we're going to take our role, our responsibility as spiritual leaders, and we're going to take it serious. And we're going to be that spiritual leader. As parents, we're going to make sure that our kids understand that your actions that tell others and show whether you're serving God or whether you're serving the world or serving the devil, and you get to choose, but we choose to serve God. And then in our conversations, let's focus them, not every conversation, but let's focus some of our conversations and talk about the things of God. Talk about what you learned in Sunday school. Talk about how talk about anything that goes on at church. It's just good to get those conversations headed in the right direction. And by doing that, we can help the family to be less of an area of chaos and more of an area that's bringing glory to God. Now, with that said, if you got a prayer list, if you want to take a little bit of time to pray over that list before we go home, thank you again for coming, being part of the service. And I do encourage you to take that list home with you. There's folks that you can't remember everybody. I can't remember everybody on that list, so I've got different lists in different places. But take them and pray for them. Spend some time praying. You can spend a lot of time doing a lot of things, but if you don't take time to pray, then you're missing one of the most important things that need to be done. God works a lot of things because his people ask. He can do them anyhow, but he's waiting for somebody to ask. So let's be the people that do the asking. So if you got a prayer list, spend a little time, and we'll go to prayer, and then thank you again. and we'll hopefully